There's so much research now that points to all the risks that are involved in using this technology for all kinds of, predictive policing, which is often, has a problem with, racial bias, disproportionately targeting minorities. And it's just such, an incommensurate measure to use this technology for, pretty benign sports events. Like, why should we roll out such a dangerous and risky technology for something that, where people just go for enjoyment?
Well, just go into a bit more detail for us about why you think it's dangerous and risky. You've mentioned one thing there in terms of predictive policing and racial bias. Is there anything else that raises concern for you about how this is being shared as well?
Yeah. So, the question to start with is probably, what would a malicious actor do with the technology? What if a dictator had access to this technology? And Australia is not a dictatorship, of course, but we are living in times in which democracy is increasingly at risk. And as these technologies sort of get normalized and we kind of get used to being surveilled this way, we're just inching a little bit closer towards that dystopian scenario, and that's what makes it so risky. So it should be used with caution. Rightfully, a lot of privacy advocates have said that it should be used only in very narrowly and strictly regulated contexts. And come on, a tennis match is clearly not one of those contexts, right? So,
do you feel there's any danger that the data that's collected at the Australian Open could be accessed by a malicious person and that could be used nefariously somehow, or not necessarily that way, it's just the gradual creep of facial technology?
I like to be optimistic. I still have trust in Australian institutions. I do think we're not living under a social credit regime just yet. Nonetheless, there's of course just this database existing, or like our facial data existing in a database, makes it inherently vulnerable. To be a bit cynical, Australia didn't have the best record in terms of cybersecurity in past years. There have been a number of high-profile breaches like Optus and Medibank. So that doesn't really inspire confidence. But that isn't my biggest concern. My biggest concern is more with how corporations are just rolling out these technologies quite rapidly, where from a legal perspective, they have covered their bases, right? So in the terms and services, the tennis fans have, quote unquote, consented to being surveilled. So it's not
by
like
buying a ticket.
By buying a ticket. Yeah. Obviously, nobody has read the terms and services because nobody does. There is a lot of research on how we should make these terms and services maybe a bit simpler, a bit more visual, having like an infographic or something like that, because nobody reads terms and services, let's just be honest. But still, you are, quote unquote, consenting. The question then becomes, is that appropriate consent? That's question number one. And question number two is it appropriate for companies to just assume what they're doing is okay? And what often happens then is, well, we may get fined, and if we get fined, it's not going to be that big of a fine. In Australia, it's typically a small fraction of what their annual turnover is, and then it becomes a cost-benefit calculation for them.
And so how widely is it used in Australia at the moment?
Well, that's difficult to say. There just a couple months ago, if I'm not mistaken, there was this high-profile case with Bunnings. There are, I'm not aware, I must say, of like any systematic studies of saying like how widely this technology is used. We know that it's easily accessible, right? So these technologies, it doesn't take like a whole lot of technical expertise these days to use just the software to do that. And because of the current regulatory landscape, we can assume that whenever this company finds it convenient, they will roll out this technology. I can't really quantify that.
Yeah.
But
from your perspective, we should be really cautious about just how rapidly it is spreading.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Raffaele Ciriello, thanks so much for coming in and having a chat to us.
Thanks for the opportunity.